Hey everyone. Um, don't think I have a whole lot for this stream. It's if you were in the Discord, I was mentioning I was talking to a couple people. I couldn't get the KiBot plugin to actually get working. I guess it has some issues with another toilet break. Not this time. Um, I couldn't get KiBot to run. I guess it has issues on Windows. And I wasn't going to do like a whole virtual machine just for it because if it's not something that like the majority of people could use, I don't think it has a ton of use to do a full video on. But yeah, so hey, money, haven't seen you here before. How's it going? Hey, Daniel. Hey, T Electronics. Hey, Daniel. Glad you could make it. Yeah, RIP. No kidding. Um, yeah, and I don't know. Hey, Johnny, good to see you again. Yeah, it's just kind of weird. It's like it seems like such a pretty well fleshed out project, and I certainly couldn't get it working, but that's not to say that it doesn't work at all. So I guess if anyone has any thoughts, I can just kind of run through what I have so far. So basically, I have Kybot installed. I used Python 3 to install it. I used pip 3 to install it. I had an issue with my Python paths, um, but Kybot won't run, but I have KiCost, which is another KiCad plugin, which is in the exact same site packages directory in my Python 3, and it runs fine. But even if I did get KiBot running, from what White Rabbit in the Discord was saying, it still has some dependencies issues because KiCad is running on Python 2, but Kybot runs on KiCad 3 or runs on Python 3, and I guess the latest KiCad in the future will be on Python 3, but it isn't already. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Hey, Lasso, Lass, Lass, I don't know how you pronounce that. It sounds Swedish. I certainly do not know how to do Swedish pronunciation, so I apologize. So yeah, what do you guys want me to start with? What I was thinking, because my original plan was to get KiBot running and then use that to do all the fab exports for the evaluation board. But since that obviously isn't happening, I think we can just do like how I would normally export it and get it ready to order. From there, I don't really know what else we would do, but at least start with that. Does that sound good? Hey, Tomas. Man, all these pronunciations I'm butchering. Money, is Kybot meant to run on the dev channel? I don't know. It seems to be able to work with both. So average of that would be Sweden. Yeah, right. Maybe go through showing what Kybot can do. Sure. So I guess this is built on KiPlot, which was a previous version. This guy, his channel or his GitHub account is IntiCMB from Argentina, but Setsoft is the guy who's been doing most of the commit. So he forked the original KiPlot, and it seems super, super cool. So basically, in a nutshell, it lets you do like a make file. So you can add all of your, I think he has an example somewhere. Yeah, so you can like set all of your configuration for all of your exports. So it'll run a DRC, ERC before it does exports. You can name what all your Gerbers are. You can have what all your options are. And you can also tie it in. You can tie it in with your bill of materials and export. So you can use the interactive HTML bomb, which is an amazing plugin. And you can do your position file, your centroid data for doing a pick and place, and then all your other documentation. So basically, with this single make file, you can streamline it for every single board that you go to export. and it makes it super cool because you don't have to remember to make sure the settings are the same each time. But thanks to Python being Python, I couldn't get it running, and kind of confusing why it doesn't seem. Can it run KiCost? I think so. I know it can run a bunch of others. Yeah, so it can run KiCost. And that's what's super cool about it is it lets you like tie in with a bunch of other plugins. So at some point, maybe I'm just doing it wrong, but White Rabbit seemed to not be able to get it on his end either, so it doesn't seem to be just me. Um, but yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. And it just sucks because he has like such a super detailed tutorial, or not really tutorial, just like um directory of everything that it can do, but there's not actually like a streamlined way. There's a streamlined way if you have Debian, so it's built pretty well for Linux, but I guess for Windows, that's where it struggles with. Because for installation, if you have Debian, it has the full package and it'll install all the dependencies together, where using pip, you have to do a bunch of other stuff with it. What is KiCost? I have never used it because I started using Octopart, which is, I think, the best by far. But basically, as long as you set what all of your BOM files and what distributors, as long as your BOM file is uh, configured correctly, it'll tie it with all the distributors that you choose, and it'll let you see what all the pricing is. But Octopart does everything like that on the fly anyway, and it has a lot more distributors. So that is certainly what I use pretty much for every board. If it's something we're doing like production wise, instead of Octopart, I'll use PartsBox. But PartsBox behind the scenes uses Octopart, which pretty much everything now uses Octopart. Even Altium's new library system, it uses Octopart. So it's kind of hard to beat. Not sure what hardware this is about, but saw the photovoltaic isolator. If you're looking at application that needs something like that, check the Scilabs faster and CMOS. Yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming he was just doing that for fun, making a solid state relay with a dedicated opto and then the drive side for an open collector. I mean, that's certainly cool to do that, but I would just buy a solid state relay. And yeah, you can use push pull optos. They don't have to be open collector like this. And if it's push pull, sometimes it'll be powered from the output side and it lets it be a heck of a lot faster. These like passive sides, they're pretty slow. I actually just ran into that with a project we're working on right now. Oh well, okay, they're not working, so how about I Spy with my little eyes, something beginning with yeah, right. So yeah, I guess I'll just go ahead and start doing the exports for the eval board. And if anyone has anything else that they want me to cover after that or go into, I certainly can. I don't want this to just be like a meandering type stream because last one kind of was that. So I'd be fine like if you guys can come up with like a start of a project that you would want me to get going on or something else. I think that works out. Oh, and Git isn't pulling this. What in the world? Um, okay, there you go. So I guess the new KiCad, it doesn't let it be open when you use GitHub or when you use Git, which is kind of a pain. So this is the evaluation board that we did on the last couple streams, and everything is pretty much finalized. From the changes last time, from the last stream, there weren't a ton, just adding more stitching vias. adding more stitching vias all around the capacitors, adjusting the capacitors, adding some silkscreen, organizing the labels for silkscreen on here, but otherwise there really wasn't a ton that was changed. So this is pretty much how it was. So for exporting Gerbers, and bear with me with I actually haven't exported from KiCad 6 yet, so it's under Fab Outputs now. So what I typically, how much effort would it take to make a switching regulator from scratch without dedicated? Honestly, with stuff like that, and it's kind of been my mentality from ever since I've been doing electronics, while something like that certainly is a great way to learn, I tend to, if there's an IC available, especially nowadays when the IC approach sometimes is even cheaper, I don't do a lot of stuff with just discrete components. It ends up just being a huge hassle, and more often than not the IC approach is going to be more efficient and better performing anyway. So that's probably not something that I would end up doing, at least not right now. So for the output directory, I always put it in the home directory of where this holds, where the outputs are, or where the project folder is, and then I'll label it Fab Outputs. And then within Fab Outputs, I will make a new folder and whatever that revision is. So this is V1A. So that's where I'll set it. And yes, to do relative path. So now it doesn't matter where it's actually at in your computer. For the layers, obviously top copper, inner 1, inner 2, bottom, front paste. There's no bottom surface mount components on this, so we don't need a bottom paste layer. There are no bottom silkscreen layers because I don't have any silkscreen on the bottom, so we don't need that. We need a front mask and a bottom mask pretty much always. Edge cuts, you always need an edge layer. And for a single board that isn't panelized, that's all the outputs that I'll do. If it's panelized and there's like V-scores or tab routes or something like that, typically I will throw those on the user comments, or now with the new KiCad, you get all these extra user layers, which is super useful. So that is how I will export it and then generate drill files to the same place. But before those are actually finalized, one thing that I often forget to check, and I did this time, is for solder mask and paste clearance. This is something that, and KiCad does this warning, use your board house's recommendations. If not, setting 0 is suggested. For solder mask clearance, I'll always do 0.05 millimeters. Minimum web, I'll do 0.1. And then for solder mask absolute clearance, this is essentially, here, I'll actually show you what this is. So front paste, by default, KiCad and pretty much all EDA tools, they will fill the paste to the exact size of your mask other than the expansion. So if we hide our mask and get rid of our paste, you can see it's the exact same size as the copper, and then our mask is expanded around there. The issue with this is sometimes you don't get a super good seal with your stencil, because if it's misaligned by a little bit, you get a gap. So depending on the thickness of your stencil, you can reduce the amount of paste there. If you're going with like a 5 mil stencil, you can drop this down to 0.05 as well, and you'll see it reduces a little bit more. The biggest disadvantage, obviously, you get less paste, which that can be an issue, but realistically, the big thing is if you have really fine pitch parts, like anything, what is this, 0.5? 0.5, so anything usually below 0.5, you can have an issue with the paste not releasing from the stencil. When it gets to that, electropolishing or nano coating the stencil can help a lot, but it really depends again on the thickness and what your viscosity of the paste is. But and I'm gonna start doing in the assembly line series, I'm gonna do like choosing a solder paste and then going through like some of the fab outputs and stencil design in a lot more detail. But as a whole, it really will depend on what your finest pitch component is. But yeah, so that's my tangent on that. So now that I made those changes, we need to re-export this, generate drill files, and this is where the make file of the Kybot would be super useful because it handles everything with this and you don't have to forget about it each time. Yeah, I don't know why they do that warning every time. Most houses expect 0. That's not really true. If they see it at 0, they're going to do whatever their default is. If you don't have it 0, most times if it infringes on their specs, they'll give you a warning or something. Oh, and then the only other thing I'll mess with is the via tenting. So as a rule for me, I will always tent vias unless it's like a first run prototype. Then I sometimes won't because it makes it easier to rework. This board, with these being QFNs, there's really not many vias in line anyway. So I think I'm just gonna not tent them. It makes it cleaner anyway. And then if there's an issue, we can always just scrape off the solder mask. But yeah, that's pretty much the default specs that I'll use. How would you go about having a 1S lithium ion charger and then applying that for 16S charger with same preference as the 1S charger? I have not found any ICs for 16S lithium ions. Yeah, I don't think you probably will. 16S, that's certainly not standard. Because how many volts is that? Because what? 10S would be 4. Yeah, that. I don't know any standard that would be 16S. But yeah, that's something you'll probably have to use with discrete components, or you can use ICs will have just a balancing portion and you can just run those in series. 68 volts, yeah. So I'm assuming you can run that just with a bunch of different ICs in series, but for the charge side, I'm assuming you're gonna have to use something custom. Um, Alistair. Good to see you. Hello from a mass spec electronics guy. Love seeing someone using KiCad. Yes, that's what this channel pretty much is based around. So you'll definitely see it a lot more if you hang around here. So then once they are exported, let me pull this up 1 second. I have way too many folders. Okay, so once I have the fab outputs here, so we have everything in this folder. At this point, I have Fab 3000, which is a DFM and like panelizing tool. I'll do a DFM of the raw Gerbers, which I've talked about before. Fab 3000 is nice. It's helpful for modifying Gerbers, but their DFM, while good, it's incredibly inefficient and takes like this board would literally take like 3 hours to do a DFM, which is asinine. So I definitely won't be doing that now. Gary, who works with us, he has Fab Cam 350, which has a much faster DFM tool. So he'll typically do that. And if I get around to it, I'll do it with Fab 3000. But it really just depends. So for something like this, I typically will use PCBWay, and I am certainly, unlike a lot of other channels out there, I'm not sponsored by them. I just use them because they are one of the cheaper East fabs, and I haven't had any issues with them. They can do pretty advanced stuff like controlled impedance. We've done 8 and 10 layer boards, controlled impedance with them, and it's worked really well. Their shipping is super fast too. So maybe they should sponsor me. But for something like this, 4 layers, and someone had mentioned in the Discord just a little bit ago about like what fab outputs or what notes I'll leave for a fab house. So, and this is something that is just kind of by default now with the Chinese fabs that everything's like automated. You really don't have to do much, but for just as an example, for if it's something that we're doing a big order, panelizing from a different fab that maybe is a little bit higher quality, like we'll use Quick Turn PCB, which is a South Korean fab. So this is what I'll typically do. So bare board, fab specs, date, any questions, how to contact me, how many copper layers, weight, thickness, trace width, all the naming. What is the surface finish? Big one is warp and twist shall not exceed 1%. That's kind of an industry standard. If it's from a Chinese fab, they're going to ignore that and they'll give you whatever you get, which for the price it is what it is. But anything else, any other fabs, they'll typically try to follow it or it'll be an X out. You can add copper to any of the unused panels. So like on the edges, that helps with warps. And then if you want X outs, you can say it. If not, and then the only thing that I will use of this for PCBWay is I will always, always, always put whichever panel is the, and actually I don't do it there. I do it on the stencil side. Whatever stencil layer, which for KiCad is f.paste, I'll say that that shall be used for stencil generation. And then I'll also mention like no changes to the stencil can be made without contacting me. That's really big. A lot of Chinese fabs, they will modify your stencil apertures to what they think makes sense, but that's impossible to do without knowing your process or your what paste you're using. So that's really important to add. But otherwise, with PCBWay, you can pretty much leave everything. For something like this that has a QFN, I'll go to ENIG. It makes it much flatter than Hassel, but it depends on what it is. If there's no QFNs and all of them are leaded components, then I'll typically go with Hassel, leaded, or leaded free or lead free. OSP, anything else I'll never use. It's always one of these three. Big thing with PCBWay, they charge you to go to 0.25 millimeter drills, a decent bit. So if you can avoid it, you want to always stay at 0.3 or above. Tenting vias, that doesn't affect it. I always use a framed stencil. I think it's well worth the money, but that's kind of personal preference. PCBWay reached out for sponsorship and I don't even do regular videos. What did they offer? Not sure. They don't tell you. Yeah, so I've been contacted by pretty much every one of these companies. The way it typically is it's based on how many people order through your link. So it's not like you get an upfront fee. So that's why, honestly, I mean, not that I have a big enough following to make any money off of it anyway, but I just find it a little slimy. You're kind of forcing people to sign up for it just so you can get paid. I think much more appealing would be, hey, you give me X amount of dollars to pitch something, because at least then you don't have like a vested interest in like convincing people to using this. But anyway, I digress. So yes, that is pretty much the path that I'll go for ordering these. And I'll probably get this ordered definitely this week. There's still a bunch of these in stock. So one of the next videos hopefully will be going through the entire process of this and doing the testing all in one video. And then depending on how that goes, maybe start selling some of these. But yeah, that's pretty much everything for this. So yeah, what does anyone else have any ideas of where the rest of this stream can go? The only other thought I had, so I've mentioned this a couple times in Discord and definitely with the patrons for just getting some ideas. So something that I may be working on in the future is doing like a Udemy style course to where it's like a lot more in depth on board design, schematic, going into detail with different topics. And I'm thinking the first course that I would do is just kind of a from scratch, like assuming you have general knowledge of electronics, like maybe a degreed engineer, or you've done like Arduino work, but you haven't fully built out a PCB from scratch. So I'd go through like the entire process, doing the schematic, the layout, and then also would cover building the board because that's something I think a lot of people get really intimidated with. Like, oh, that's great. I have this awesome board that I have designed, but now I'm forced to use like JLC's assembly and use their parts because I don't know how to assemble it. And I think that's a really big like handicap that can make it to where you're really restricted on what kind of boards you can do. So that's what I'm thinking like the first course would be. And what I think would make it a little unique is it would be as I'm going over a specific design. And when I go into like, oh, I'm placing these decoupling caps, then it would be like an aside, and I would talk about like what are decoupling caps, what values you should use, when, where should you place them, stuff like that. So it would be like real world coursework to where it's as I'm designing a board, what's important and what do you need to know. Um, so the first board is probably going to be like an Arduino style using an Atmega 328 and just using like some different sensors, like a high powered output, something like that. So the only thing I can think of the rest for this stream is if unless anyone else has some ideas, I could maybe start working on that board. Um, and then because obviously for the course I would end up redesigning it while doing the course itself, but I would need to have it designed anyway to know where I'm gonna go with it. So I think that maybe could be interesting, but let me know what you guys think. And also let me know like the course if that's something you're interested in, any other ideas you have for that or anything like that. I use GLC for smaller boards and assembly as I can't solder a 603 with my eyes. They're cheaper than PCBWay for small boards. Yeah, I mean, it depends. And this is what I'm really going to go into in the future is like how we assemble prototypes. If you're assembling any board without a stencil and without squeegeeing the paste on, you're doing it incredibly inefficient. I certainly don't fault people for still using like an iron and everything for surface mount parts, but it's just incredibly inefficient. I mean, we can do a board with 300 parts completely by hand, and I can assemble that in like an hour and a half, 2 hours. If I'm using the pick and place for the jelly beans, maybe 30, 45 minutes, and that's without even using our oven. So that's certainly it wouldn't be possible using a soldering iron. Go for it unless you want to make an LED driver with no flicker. Man, you just got to PWM it faster. What is it, like 300 hertz is if you're not moving your eyes fast or if it's not moving. I usually go to like 10,000 hertz, and that usually gets rid of all flicker. Yes, that sounds like something I would watch. I hadn't ordered any boards yet. Sweet. Design with memory layout or PCB chip antenna. Memory layout, be more specific, like DRAM, or what are you thinking of specifically? PCB chip antenna would be good. That is so far out of my wheelhouse. I don't do any antenna design. Um, for the vast majority of products out there too, unless you're doing like 20 or 30,000 units a year, you're almost always going to be better off using a module. Wait, you need to get it not to flicker. Oh, while filming videos, yes, that has to be faster. So I have lights up above that I have to turn off during this because they get a really bad flicker. I don't know what it depends on what shutter speed and FPS you're filming at. DRAM, yeah, could do a DRAM in the future. We actually just did the problem with DRAM right now is they're almost all out of stock because we used a Micron DRAM like 128 meg, 128 or 256, and the 10 that we ordered for the prototypes, that was all there was. which kind of is unfortunate, but that's kind of the name of the game right now. J Juck, yes, please make a how-to assembly. Will do. So then I guess as a question, since you guys seem to like the assembly side, would that be um would that be an interesting like course video to where or a lesson? And when I say like lesson, think of it like Udemy, so it's more of like a formal lecture, like we're talking multiple videos. It wouldn't be through YouTube, and there could be like PDF handouts, quizzes, maybe even like a certification thing or something, whatever that would be worth afterwards. Would it be worthwhile having just an assembly video? I was thinking of tying that in with the how to design a PCB from scratch, but if you think that could be useful elsewhere, because it's just hard to cover stuff like that in a single YouTube video or so. That's why I was thinking of doing the Udemy style, and that would be I still haven't figured out how all that would work. It wouldn't be through Udemy itself. It would probably be hosted on our website just through like a separate like lesson portal. And I'm thinking it would be essentially like if you're a patron, you would get access to all of the courses all included, or you could just buy like individual courses separately. Pricing wise, I have no idea. I haven't thought that far. But anything like that, if that would be useful, let me know or how you would want to do it. Have you used your designing for anything around the house to enhance? So I guess this is kind of like the thing, like if you're a mechanic, you don't like to work on your own cars. Same thing here, honestly. I have including my 3D printer. 3D printer, I've never done a single thing around the house. I made one thing for my mom for Mother's Day. It was like a number one mom trophy, but that's the only thing I've ever 3D printed for fun. Electronics wise, I think for an aquarium, I have, and it's still not even done, but one board for that. Otherwise, I've never actually designed a single thing for fun, like for use around the house. Everything's always been for work because it's just like again, like the mechanic. You do this all day, it kind of becomes redundant doing it for fun. Yeah, but that's that. Pay-per-view if required for a few bucks. Yeah, again, I keep going back to Udemy because I think it would be set up like that. Like you would pay X amount of dollars, you get access to the entire course. Or if you're a patron to me, the channel, you would get access to every course I have, which if this takes off or people are interested, I have some ideas for maybe three, four, five courses down the road. I don't know. We'll see. We have an RF wizard working who's just 600 meters from my office. He designed a PCB antenna for our LoRa board. That's awesome. Yeah, to do the real RF, that pretty much has to be all you do. Me and my company, we're pretty wide in what we do, which means some things we have to just not do because they're too specialized. And RF and antenna design is kind of that. We've had a couple that came up that I thought were going to materialize, and we would just outsource to a dedicated antenna design firm or subcontractor, but they never came up. And all the wireless stuff that we ever do, we just get away with using a module for the reasons I said before. Do you do much Python scripting in KiCad? So I'm getting used to it. I mean, I certainly know Python. I started all this by programming. I actually originally was a much better programmer than electronics, but I haven't really messed with KiCad at all. KiCad 6, they're going to have a much better scripting tool or interface, so I might start doing it a little more then, but until then, no, not really. Um, I designed some relay in PWM for lighting in the lab, was a holiday project. There you go. I have my office in my home. Yeah, that helps. Yeah, I've certainly done, so back to the thing, have I done any electronics designing for things around the house? I've done a decent bit for stuff around the office. Um, but nothing crazy. And again, it's way less than I would probably like. It's a lot more just work stuff. So back to my original thing, would you want, so here I can pull up 1 second. Oh yeah, no one answered. Would you want a course to be just on the assembly side? If I tie in assembly and rework, I certainly think there's enough there to do an entire course of. Or would you rather it be tied with one of the others and just have a piece of it be the assembly? I think either or could work. I have only focused just fixing them. We have these places you can take electronics to recycle, and the amount of people throwing stuff away. Yes, it certainly is. And unfortunately, that whole e-waste is what one of the reasons, the others being incredibly political, that made Rojas become a thing, which is still tragic. I would still be interested in PoE. Okay. I actually have never done any PoE. I've had like 2 or 3 projects from people who have come to me that never materialized, so I know a decent bit about it. What specifically would you want with PoE? So you just have a PoE box that supports PoE on the output side, and then we would build something that is powered by PoE, and then what kind of communication over the RJ line? Or would you just want the power side, and then the whatever is going to be over the RJ, you're fine with using whatever? So back to the that original course. So what I have right now is it would just be like an Arduino style like dev board on a 328p. It would have a Type C port for power and programming. So the board would have a USB to UART IC, so you could use an Arduino bootloader to program it, or it would also have obviously like the ICSP header, so you can program it directly through Atmos Studio or something without a bootloader. It would have a 12-volt barrel jack on it that you could also power, and it would use that 12-volt power for some like high-powered FET outputs on it. There would be a I squared C temperature and humidity sensor, so I could show how I squared C is set up. It would have 2 buttons or a couple buttons and a couple LEDs, and then all the other signals would just be broken out in breadboard spacing, so you can use this to just hook up to a breadboard like that. The powered PoE stuff, that PoE thing. Right now, designing a lighting system for my kitchen and closed closet cupboards. Can't justify the 1,000 USD if bought from IKEA. It'll cost around 250. Both. Oh, dang. So people really like PoE. What? So if we do the PoE, what would you want this to just be a like just a power hub, and then it just outputs whatever regulated 12 or 5 volts from it, and then you could use that to power whatever? Or would you want it to be an all-in-one, like it has an ESP32 on it, it has an Arduino, an Atmega on it, something like that, to where it's like an all-in-one microcontroller? Because I'm sure, can't you buy just PoE modules that output voltage, that output power? Yeah, so you can just use something like this. Is that what you're thinking, or all in one? Yeah, so like this, and only 10 bucks. So what is this? So this takes in power from the RJ45 line, converts it down, and then outputs DC out the output side. So are you thinking you would want to see something like this built, or would you want on the right hand side here to be a ESP or some sort of microcontroller that we then build a project with? Because something just like this, like here, I assume that they're pretty ubiquitous and can buy them pretty much everywhere. One thing I do remember when I was looking into PoE is the different standards and the different revisions of PoE were a complete cluster. Like, kind of almost as bad as, I think there was a Wikipedia page on it, like almost as bad as USB, to where every single revision is more and more convoluted. Yeah. So depending on which version, like the amount of power you can source from it varies like drastically, and you have to make sure which one you're talking to so you don't overload the upstream circuit with microchip. Okay, so then you would want all of this on a board itself. Got it. So what would you want? So if we have a micro on this board, what would make the most sense? Probably an ESP32 because that takes in an Ethernet signal. And then would it just be like an evaluation board to where it's just like a standard ESP? But are there ESP32 with Ethernet VRMI and powered by PoE? Got it. Um, oh, so basically just like this board. That's funny. That's what's crazy about like now with the whole like maker industry and stuff. It's like literally impossible to think of something or something with one of these like ESPs or an Atmega that hasn't already been done. Like that's hilarious. Like this is exactly what you guys were talking about. So 100 meg interface with i8. So that's the version 3 standard. So right here. So it has 51 watts that it can source. So yeah, then that's just a generic eval board, exactly what I was saying. So yeah, that's been done. Any any other ideas that haven't been done? That is really funny. Are there more that are like that? Oh, so even Espressive has an eval board that's been done. You're more interested in the design phase. Got it. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I get that. I'm just thinking because this evaluation board series that I'm starting with the buck converter, I'm thinking of starting to sell those just here and there. Since I have to build some anyway to test, I think it makes sense to try to sell some. And it's just kind of annoying if there's one that already exists just like that 10G internet. I am almost positive that an ESP32 doesn't support 10 gigabit, but I could be wrong. So let me check. I've never used an ESP32 for Ethernet. I've always done wireless. Yeah, so it's only 100 meg. That's what I figured. So we would have to use something else that supports, which 10 gigabit, that's really, really fast. Not much supports that. I don't even think many of the transceivers you could get on DigiKey would even support gigabit. A gigabit it would, not 10. Because even like on modern laptops and motherboards, I don't think 10 gig is very common yet. Gigabit is. 5G vaccine programmer, yeah, that'd be nice. Since everyone who's had the vaccine obviously has microchips all the way through them, now we need a way to talk to them. And if I have a way to like, hack the microchips, then I would have so much power, be able to control everyone. That'd be so nice. Okay, so 10, 100. Yeah, so none of these controllers, I don't know why it came up. That's not even like Ethernet. DigiKey search. I guess all searches get kind of annoying sometimes. Thanks, Bill. Right. Here, I guess a switch or a hub would make the most sense. Even the Raspberry Pi CM4 can't do more than 3. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so on DigiKey, the fastest they have is 2.5 gigabit, and they have one. Oh, and that's an actual. Oh, these are actual purpose-built hubs, so it's not even an IC. I mean, even USB Gen 2, USB Type C Gen 2, like we did for the USB hub, the micro, I think it was a microchip switch. That was the only one that supported Gen 2 or Gen 3. So I don't think that this high-speed stuff is out in the real world much or out in the non-NDA'd world, which is kind of a pain, but I guess it is what it is. But I do the CM4, that thing is amazing. We've used that now in one project that's mostly done and in another that we're starting, but they have a massive issue with stock like everyone else, but there's virtually none available anymore. PieShop.us was the only place that was having some stock, but I don't really think they have much anymore. I think virtually all of these are out of stock. Some of the real high performance ones were, but that's about it. Yeah, I think they're all out of stock now, which isn't a surprise, but it's kind of unfortunate. Could you find me a ready-made 16 SCC? Again, I don't think you're going to be able to find um I don't think you're going to be able to find a 16S. That's pretty insane. Hello, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce your name. I'll call you S. How's it going, S? Because I think they go to like 12 cells. Oh, there's one for 14 cell. Oh, here's a 16 cell. Okay. Oh, look at this. They're all going to be from one or two one or two brands, I bet though. Yeah, Analog or Maxim. So they're the exact same ICs, just in a different series. And most of them seem to not be for new design. So we have 5 left. But this isn't going to have a lot integrated because there's not enough pins here. So this might be just like the balancing side that I was thinking. So yes, we can try both of these. And that's nickel metal hydride or nickel cadmium. So I don't think that's going to help you out very much for a lithium ion charger. You could always try. Of course. Oh, there you go. Nickel metal hydride or nickel cadmium. So I guess let me get rid of number of cells. So lithium ion. I guess I'll do lithium iron phosphate just for fun. And I won't do multi-chemistry because clearly the multi-chemistry is just nickel metal hydride or nickel cadmium. Yeah, so these, the most, are for 6 cells. But something that you could do, and it was for a project that we were looking into that used, I think it used 12 cells, is if you handle the balancing with one of those balancing ICs and you handle the charging just as if they're in parallel, you actually don't need to have a charger that supports all of them. But that would obviously be nice. So you might be able to see something, and this is what I was trying to say earlier. I think battery management is where it would be. Hi, thanks for trying. It's more like a project to learn everything along the way. Yeah, I mean, if you've never done a PCB design or something, starting with a 16S lithium pack, that's pretty ambitious. Not that you can't do it, but be careful. There's some pretty big risk here. It's pretty dangerous. Messing with lithium ion batteries is a about the most dangerous thing you can do, not with AC. So just be careful. So this is a 16 cell, and this I limited for lithium ion. So maybe this designed for probably will end in fire. Absolutely, that's the way. That's the way it ends up. Where he says CCCV, do you know if the compensation values are the same, both op amps? Well, I mean CCCV, that just depends on which point of the charge cycle it is. Yeah, just the angle will be starting with 1S. Got it. Yeah, so the way, and I've mentioned this because there's the old like saying where it's not voltage that kills you. And usually it's people aren't very electrically inclined, so they say it's the amps that'll kill you. They don't know that, like, they mean to say it's the current. But it's such a misleading saying because yes, it's the current that kills you. But if you don't have a high enough voltage, the resistance of your hand, it's never going to go through you. So the way I always say is if you're dealing with DC power or really low voltage anything, you can catch stuff on fire or it ends in fire. If you're dealing with AC or high voltage stuff, it ends in fire or it can kill you by electrocuting you. Um, but yeah, I mean, you have high current DC. That's just as likely, if not more likely, to catch something on fire than mains out of your wall, because mains obviously is going to be lower current for the most part. And if it's lower current, it's not going to heat up as much. Where there's magic smoke, there's probably magic fire. Yeah, right. Your GitHub username is magic smoke. I'm surprised that wasn't taken. So yeah, lasso. So this is what I was talking about. You can use a IC like this, and this actually handles 16 series, and this will handle presumably protection, and it also handles balancing. So as long as you have something separate to charge these, you can probably use this. You can probably use this fine for what you're doing. So they have the blocking diodes to prevent it reverse. Um, yeah, so I think this would do what you need. It was, but I claimed it because of username squatting. That's hilarious. Still waiting for EMI and 3 caps for it. Okay, so I know I keep saying soon, but it actually is soon. So if you saw in Discord, I let me see where I posted it. So I've been working on doing a new workbench for the EMI test bench, and it's pretty much done. Tomorrow I'm going to do like the final coat of paint, then I have to mount this up and put all the equipment on it. So there's actually a chance of me starting that series pretty soon. Hopefully. We'll see. I would say hopefully within the next like probably month or two. That's kind of my goal. Forgot to add that I meant buck converter with CC and CV, so not charger. I mean, buck converters by default are kind of constant voltage unless it's a different control scheme. But you can use switching regulators that are CC, but it's just a different control scheme. If that's, I think that's what you're asking. But yeah, I've never really messed with any super high series count lithium ion batteries, but I've looked into stuff like this to handle the balancing, because that's the big thing, is if you don't have a way to make sure they're balanced, or if one of them goes bad, to be able to cut that cell out. Because when lithium ion cells go bad, a lot of times they'll act as like a short, so all the other voltage gets dumped into the bad cell, and that's how you get the magic smoke and fire, which obviously isn't a good thing. And someone was saying, actually, because I've been posting in Discord a lot, that STM32s are coming back in stock some, which would be pretty cool. But not really. 40 out of 2800. And if we limit it to cut tape, yeah, I mean, we're talking 9 out of 350. So I certainly wouldn't say, and every one of them, other than 2, is a BGA. But they are L0 series, which is interesting. L0 and L4. It had been the high performance one traditionally that had been in stock more. I want both. Can't it be implemented to a TL? But what do you need both for? You have to be able to toggle them. You can't have CC and CV at the same time. Unless you're trying like an LED driver, which will be constant voltage until you max it out, and then it switches to constant current. L or TL 494. Oh, you're using like the discrete side. How expensive is this? Oh no. Oh, you must be talking about the STM. Um, yes, and like a lab supply. Got it. Um, yeah. That this is honestly out of my realm right now. Just 'cause like again, like I said, stuff like this I tend to use ICs for. Um, but yeah, I mean, this certainly should work. I don't see why it wouldn't. Push-pull converter. Yeah, I would probably go with something a little newer though. This seems to be pretty old. Oh no, August 2021. Never mind. It's just weird because you normally don't see stuff in through-hole packages that are modern, at least in something like this. Oh, were there not? Never. Oh yeah, there were. Okay. Oh, but that's through Rochester, so maybe there's two manufacturers using the same name, and I know Rochester is just a distributor for TI. Yeah, so they are. There's a TI and then onsemi. That's a new logo for onsemi. It used to be green. I guess they're rebranding. But that's, yeah, lab power supply. That's something I've never gotten around to do just because, again, everything that we do is for pretty much for a job. And for a benchtop supply, I just buy one instead of building one myself. But I guess that definitely seems like a pretty neat project, learning wise at least, because you definitely can get a decent bit out of it. Um, so anyone else have any ideas for the rest? I mean, I was figuring doing another 2 hour stream, but I don't know if I want to just keep on like another rambling, a rambling type stream. I don't think I'm that interesting just to keep hearing myself talk. But let me know what you guys think. Um, yeah, it just sucks that the Kybot never ended up working. But I guess that's the way it goes sometimes. But I am pretty happy with how this board turned out at least. Whoa. How did that do? Oh, they changed the silkscreen to be black by default, I guess. Would you plan a compensation for both then CV and CC? I mean, if you're having it to where it's selectable, to where you have the option to set the voltage and then it clamps it at a certain current, honestly, I don't really know how you do that. I would assume you would have to have, I mean, I don't know what you mean by compensation, but yeah, I mean, you're going to have some sort of compensation for no matter how you do that. Their KiCad's 3D viewer has gotten pretty fantastic in the nightlies. That's one thing I've noticed. And this isn't even with ray tracing on, which is pretty cool. But I don't like how the silk screen defaults to black because it's not like you ever do black silk screen. At least I never have. Board stack up colors. Oh, is that why it's doing that? Go figure. There we go. So then board setup probably has the thickness of the PCB in this nightly, I assume. Yes. And we have a dielectric of 1.51 millimeters. So yeah, that would explain why the board is so unreasonably thick in the 3D viewer. Um, but yeah, any other suggestions? If not, I'll the parts at the op amps, type 2 and type 3. Again, going around in circles here. This isn't something that I'm overly familiar with, doing it from a PWM driver like this. So I wouldn't really be able to help you too much on this, I don't think. Everything that I would do using like um would be like using the IC that we used in here. And a lot of times these will have a CC feature. If it maxes it out, it'll have an overcurrent limit. It depends. On this one you could do, because here using I squared C, you could set what the current limit is, and that you could use as like a sort of constant current limit, because if it hits that current limit, it's going to adjust the voltage to hold it at there. You just have to make sure with something like this that once it hits that, it doesn't just open the circuit and shut it off. But with this one, since you have the SM bus or the I squared C, I'm sure that that's probably configurable. I don't know for sure if it is or not, but that's my assumption. Always thought kids in remote villages could learn classroom via ham shortwave radio if the cost could be low enough. Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't have a clue about how education works in those villages, but yeah, that seems reasonable. You just have to make sure that whoever is doing the lesson has their radio and everything, and you're set up on the wrong frequency. That's something I've always wanted to get into. I think that'd be really cool, but you have to get like certifications and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, it's been an hour on this stream. It doesn't seem like there's any more like path on what anyone wants to do. So I'll give it a couple more minutes if someone has anything, but if not, I think I'll call it a day for this. And then maybe the next stream I'll go into doing the that evaluation board that I might do for the first course if I end up doing that. Or if anyone has any thoughts for that the course or any lessons in general. And also, of course, if you haven't joined the Discord, certainly do that. Links in the description, and same with my Patreon. Any support is much appreciated. Both of those links are in the description. At least they should be. But yeah, so I guess I will leave it here. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I know this one was kind of all over the place. I really didn't want to have two in a row, but that certainly is the way it happens sometimes. I should have got it set up sooner than I did, but it is what it is. So yeah, let me know either in the comments of this video or in Discord any suggestions for future videos or anything else. And I will see everybody in the next stream or the next video. Have a good one, guys.